Hi, my name is Dan Gomez. This is Mental Health Super Omnia. Mental health above all. We identify and understand mental health issues and the paths to help. Today, we want to talk about two challenges to your relationship after 50. We have with us three guests. First is Barry Jacobs. Barry is a clinical psychologist, family therapist, and a principal for Health Management Associates. He's a writer, columnist, and maintains a psychotherapy practice in Media, Pennsylvania. We also have Julia Mayer, also a clinical psychologist in private practice in media, who for 3 decades specialized in helping women in caregiver roles, troubled marriages, and histories of sexual trauma. She's an author of at least 4 books and is active in social media. And finally, we have Erica Burgoon. Erica is a member of the leadership team at Equilibria Psychological and a licensed clinical psychologist with 25 years of experience. She provides clinical services across the lifespan and specializes in working with depression, anxiety, and trauma. Julia, we have read Love and Meaning After 50, as well as many of the other writings that you and Barry have put out there, and there's quite a bit. This is a great book, and I highly recommend it. But I'd like to focus first on the empty nest. People I talk to tell me that not only is there a feeling of an empty nest, that the kids have gone away, but frankly, they may have outgrown their partner. Tell us what you see in an empty nest, and will that nest ever be put back together again?
Yeah, a lot of times people dread having their kids leave. And when they do leave, there's tremendous grief. And that's very typical. In addition, sometimes the husband and wife, the couple, look at each other in their empty house and kind of think like, who are you? They have drifted apart. Not intentionally, usually. It's because they've been so busy. They've been partners in the business of raising their kids. They've been, checking in around family, child, finances, but they neglected their own relationship, their own emotional intimacy. They stopped communicating about the things that they were dreaming about and wishing for and their futures. And as a result, it's like they no longer know each other. But I don't at all think it's hopeless. That's why we wrote this book, Barry and I, who are married for 35 years and have been
And,
through it.
well, wait. It's not like we didn't know each other emotionally. I don't think I turned to you after our second and last
No,
child went away to college and say, who the heck are you? Um, but, but we had to think about what our marriage is going to be focused on now because our kids were out in the world. And frankly, our kids didn't want us so involved in their lives anymore anyway. And that was one of the reasons why we started writing books together, because that was not going to be replacing child rearing, but be another source of mutual interest and work together. But I'm not here to argue with you, Julie. I mean, we don't do that uh, in general.
no.
But I want to make sure that folks that we didn't have a crisis in our marriage or anything like that.
No, I didn't mean that. I meant we got to the empty nest place and we experienced some of it ourselves. There was definitely an effort on both our parts to try to find some more things to do together. We started taking a lot more walks and we definitely wrote books together. We've traveled more. There's an adjustment. It's a huge change in people's lives. So, people should be anticipating it, figuring out what they need to do in advance so they don't have a crisis, and then dealing with these changes, including grieving together. If they've had a very child-focused marriage or relationship, then when the kids are gone, there's this huge sense of loss, and that can make people move apart and, kind of cry in their own corners, or it can bring them together where they can share those feelings and feel connected around that.
Yeah, Julie, I did want to ask you to talk more. You had mentioned grieving earlier, and you just brought it up again. Um, I was curious, should couples be prepared for the fact that this may be like a grief process, and even more so that it may be like a grief process for one partner and not nearly as much for the other? I imagine that creates a big sense of disconnect if one partner maybe is very excited for this next stage of life and some of the differences and freedoms that come with it, and another is experiencing a really tremendous sense of loss. How can couples maybe be prepared for that and navigate that?
Oh, that's a great question. And I do think that happens a lot. A lot of times in couple relationships, one person is way more invested in the kids than the other. Not always. And hopefully in going into the future that it happens less and less, but it has certainly been an issue. Um, and so the one person who is highly invested can be grieving, and the other one's like, yeah, let's go travel. Let's have a great time. And they're not feeling the same thing emotionally. Not only that, but the griever is feeling, neglected and unseen and unsympathized with. And it's possible that the person who wants to go celebrate is feeling like they don't have a fun partner anymore. So that could be a crisis. Yes.
Yeah, there's another source of the grief too, I think, and it's not like you reach middle age and your kids go off into the world and you're suddenly old. I don't think that's the case, but I do think it's a kind of threshold that people reach where they're not young anymore. I mean, their kids are out and about, and now, yes, it's a new stage of life with lots of different possibilities and opportunity for redefinition, but it also represents this idea that I'm getting older. I'm not a spring chicken any longer, and that may be a shock to people suddenly 50 years old whose kids are out of the house.
Oh,
Absolutely.
yeah. It's like, what's the meaning in my life now, too?
Barry, you had said, jumped in and said that you did not necessarily find that you didn't know who Julie was. And, when the two of you went through this, so when your book arrived at my house recently, so we could prepare for the discussion today, as a person in my 40s and with a spouse who is nearing 50, I joked with him, I'm like, get us prepared, before we reach that stage. And I'm wondering if you could speak to people my age in our 40s or maybe a little bit younger. Are there things that people maybe a decade or more before they reach this point in life can think about and could be doing to strengthen their relationship in advance of the time they experience themselves as empty nesters?
For sure. I mean, that's really the whole point of the book. We identify two very common transitions that couples go through, and so empty nest is one, but people have to deal with the fact again that they're getting older. They have to deal with the fact that maybe their parents are getting older and have some additional needs. Uh, there are often changes. Sometimes people are at the height of their careers. Sometimes people are winding down their careers. Uh, there's all sorts of transitions that people have to make. The idea that we discuss with clients is they have to really think about them and not just not just kind of roll along day by day. They really need to be intentional about this, and I think through intentional planning they can make a lot from this new phase of life. They can handle the emptiness better. The whole idea here is we want the couples to come together and strengthen their relationships rather than have them inadvertently drift apart because something's come up and they're not aligned anymore. We want to increase the alignment. We want to increase the sense of mutual purpose and mutual affection, and so that takes work, and we want people to do the work.
When we wrote the book, there was a lot of discussion about, sorry, about the title. And we said over 50 because it was in collaboration with AARP. But the truth is, we talked about how actually people a decade or two before should be thinking, how do I keep my relationship strong? I mean, the divorce rate isn't good. It's like, what is it now, 40% for the first one? Um, and then it increases for second and third, right? Um, so how, it's important for younger couples to also feel like marriage or a couple relationship is a conscious effort. You purposely treat the other person well. You purposely talk with them, spend time with them, share with them. If you don't put that effort in, And this is what we want people to know, that it can go badly later. But if you put all those efforts in as you're going, then no, you don't. You shouldn't have a crisis at the empty nest. It's a combination of grief and opportunity. And that would be a wonderful way for it to go.
Yeah, I mean, one other way of talking about this is, I mean, we're big fans of the marriage researcher John Gottman, and as you probably know
Too.
his work very well too, right? I mean, his research sets the gold standard for the way we understand marriages. So you may recall that he and his fellow researchers identified two times in a marriage when divorce is most likely to happen. So one is fairly early in the marriage, like 5 to 6 years into the marriage, when there's often a lot of conflict and the conflict is irresolvable and people just
Give up.
they give up and they tear apart. But the second type of divorce is really more pertinent to what we're talking about today, and that is occurs around 16 or 17 years into a marriage when people have basically found that they can't resolve the problems. They don't have a sense of togetherness. They have learned to coexist amiably, but there's not a lot of attachment there. There's not a lot of glue holding them together, and maybe it's just been the kids who hold them together. But at the point at which the kids are out of the house, and that glue is a little weaker than it was, then people look at one another and say, we just aren't really connected, and that's when what's called gray divorce is most likely to occur. It's not that people have huge conflicts. It's more like I just am not. I'm feeling kind of lukewarm toward you, and I just don't want to continue. Especially, for instance, if you have diabetes and you don't take good care of your diabetes, and I can anticipate that 5 or 10 years from now you're going to need some caregiving, and I'm not feeling so loving towards you now, and I don't want to be obligated to take care of you 10 years from now.
So, some time ago, during the Middle East wars, I talked to a psychologist who said that there's times when he counsels returning veterans to end their marriage, and I was literally shocked. But in this environment, people get married for any number of reasons, and it could be that they truly have grown apart and are different people. Is there a decision-making process here that we that tells us we want to stay together, we want to make that effort, or is there a decision-making process that says, hey, there was a little vignette in this empty nest chapter in your book where someone was having a lot of emotional discussions with another woman who was also an empty nest. Was that an opportunity for that guy to go off and create a new life? I mean, where do you guys fall in that regard?
Well, we wrote the book because the divorce rate for people over 60, sorry, having allergies today. It might be the smoke. I don't know. The divorce rate for people over 60 had doubled in the previous 20 years, and the divorce rate for people over 65 had tripled.
Wow.
And it's not a high rate, but it had tripled. So there was this change in how people see these relationships, because that's not, I mean, you would think sort of logically, why would someone over 65 bother getting divorced? But if you think about it, they could live another 30 years. They might really only be 2/3 of the way through. And they might be thinking, I don't want to, like Barry said, take care of this guy with diabetes who didn't do all the things he should have done so that I wouldn't have to take so much care of him. Or I don't want to take care of this wife who never wants to do any of the fun things I want to do. I want to have fun. I want to live my life. Or the wife or the female partner. I mean, I don't want to be stereotyped about this. It can happen in any way whatsoever, but women earn money more now than they did 20, 30, 40 years ago. So they have the option sometimes of divorcing without being completely panicked about money. So there are all these factors in our culture that have changed, that have led to this increase. So our perspective has been, it's a long answer to a question I could have answered quickly. We like to try to help people stay together.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Julie. I mean, we do like to help people stay together. The purpose of this book was, in fact, to help people make these transitions in the last third of life, and draw it together, not draw apart. And I mean, I think uh, it doesn't mean, to your question, Dan, that people should stay together just for the sake of staying together. But oftentimes there's a way to rekindle some of the original bonds, or create a different bond, and have a marriage that may be more gratifying than it's ever been. And there are folks, and we've both now, I think all of us have known people or treated people clinically who we said these folks shouldn't be together, right? And then it becomes a question of how to help them make whatever decision that they're going to make. But if they decide to break up, to provide the clinical support to help them do that without causing additional damage through an adversarial relationship. But I mean, I think our bias is to try to keep folks together.
Do you find that there are key questions or that spouses could be asking of one another, or important, information that they could be sharing about themselves with their spouse that tend to help rebuild those bonds and that connection?
A lot of times when people have drifted apart, they don't like to be vulnerable with each other. So they don't cry with each other. They don't even express what they're upset about. They don't confront each other. They avoid arguments. If the same argument has happened a million times and they've never resolved it, they just stop. So we want to encourage people, and that is what this whole book is about, how to talk to each other, how to listen. People forget that a major part of communication is just listening, just taking it in, not judging, not getting defensive, not responding necessarily right away, just listening to what the other person has to say. We want an encouraging environment where people feel like they can share and they can count on their partner to just listen and accept, even if it's a criticism of them. Sit with it. Okay, the person says, you never laugh with me. Okay, instead of getting defensive, you want to try to solve that. How do we make it so that we laugh together more? That would be great. So it's all about slowing it down, listening well, trying to remember that you're both, at least if you're trying to save your marriage or your relationship, you're both doing your best to care about the other. So they're not your adversary, they're your partner. So that's where, we want people to do the work.
Yeah. You use the word acceptance, and acceptance, I think, is a really important component of all this, because ultimately, if you reach this stage of life and decide that you, in fact, are going to make a renewed commitment to one another, it's in essence saying, I'm making a renewed commitment to accepting this person, warts and all. And not that people are full of warts, they're not, but that we all have our idiosyncrasies. And it means that I'm saying I'm gonna be with this person for all the wonderful things that they do, and for all the wonderful aspects of their to their personalities, and also the things that maybe I don't like so much. And then I have to accept the things that I don't like so much. And that acceptance piece, I think, is hard. And for some folks who reach this stage of 50s and 60s, and they decide, hey, I got all these extra years, I don't have to accept this anymore, then that's where they may opt for divorce. I have a couple now in their 70s that I've been seeing for a while, that both really smart, caring people, but they're really in some ways in different places in their lives, even though they're approximately the same age. One of the spouses is all about learning and growing and going places and doing things, and the other is sort of said, like, I've done that, I've been there, done that, I don't need to do that anymore. I want to stay home, and I want to just do the things that are comfortable for me. I'm not about challenging myself anymore. And so they have a real dilemma. Do they stay together, and if so, how do they negotiate these very different areas of focus in their lives? Or do they not accept this other person's choice, and basically say, we'd be better off in not living together, or not being married anymore, and really defining our lives differently?
Barry, Let me just say this. Little known fact is my wife and I did ballroom dancing for quite a number of years. And we joined a number of groups, if you will. And there were a couple of couples that were in the group that were not married. They, in fact, were married to other people. And they went through that exact situation. And their spouses said, look, I don't want to dance. But do you really want to dance? Go ahead and go dance. So they found a dance partner at the dance studio or another dance studio, whatever, and they would get all dressed up in ball gowns and in tuxedos and whatnot, and go have a night on the town 12 times a year. So is that a good solution? Is that a bad solution? Because, you know, I want to travel, you know, somebody else doesn't. Is it okay for me to go ahead and travel? I mean, what happens here? And
Well,
in addition to that, stop and think about it. Here's Erica bringing the book home for her husband, showing her the book. And I'm just imagining someone saying, oh my God, do I have to talk about my feelings again?
Always, right? Oh,
Yes.
yes, exactly. Yeah. But you know, to your point, Dan, about travel, I mean, I heard about a couple recently where, again, getting their 60s, maybe 70s, one of the spouses wants to travel and wants to travel extensively. The other spouse doesn't want to travel at all. And so their solution is the spouse that wants to travel goes off and travels, and they go through weeks or sometimes months being apart. And that's just become a new aspect of their marriage. They both seem to accept that this is the best compromise that they could come up with. However, and here's the however, I mean, you could imagine that the decreased time together, in essence, they're essentially saying we're not going to share this part of life together, the you know, the time portion of life, but also the interest that you know, in travel, or maybe the person who stays home has a whole other set of interests that they're not going to share now with a spouse who's away a lot of the time. And so we're not gonna have as much mutuality as we had before. We're not gonna have There's not gonna be as much stuff that bonds us, and that may weaken their relationship over time.
You know, a really common instance of this is when you have a blended family and one person has children and maybe even grandchildren from their prior relationship and the other one doesn't, and or has another set. And one of them may feel like I want to use this time now that I'm retired or whatever, downsizing, to travel, to enjoy my life. And the other one may say, I want to spend every second I can with my grandkids. And their partner might say, well, I don't. And that can be a source of discussion, conflict, and probably compromise if it goes well. You know, that's what we do with our partners. We compromise. But sometimes people get to a point in life and they don't want to compromise anymore, especially if there isn't enough of that emotional connection in the bank. You know, that needs to be there for people to say, I'm willing to sacrifice something for you if you're willing to sacrifice for me. If there isn't enough of that emotion in the bank, then nobody's really willing to sacrifice.
You talk in the book about this concept of me time and we time, which I kind of appreciate breaking it down that way. And I imagine that balance is different in every relationship and for every couple. So it sounds like you're speaking to the importance of talking about that and finding what works for each couple. Can you talk a little bit more about how couples can sort of negotiate through their respective me time and we time needs?
They have to decide that they want to talk through it. And that requires, like we recommend, a regular meeting time. You know, it's not a business, it's a partnership, it's a marriage, it's a relationship. But even so, meeting regularly and having a plan for that makes it happen. You know, if you say, well, we'll talk about where, you know, where we want to go for retirement. We'll talk about that later. It doesn't get done. And I knew a couple where the wife was shocked when her husband said, I am going to retire at the end of the year and then we're moving to North Carolina. And she said, wait, all my friends are here in Pennsylvania. I don't want to leave. And he's like, well, that's the plan. And they had never spoken about it. So it's so important for couples to be sort of committed to the idea that we're going to talk things through. We're going to talk about what we each ideally want, what we each need, what we need from each other, And we're going to work out what will be, of course, as it always is, like I said, a compromise, but something that everyone can live with as we take care of each other. It takes a lot of conversation, a lot of listening, a lot of not judging, a lot of patience. And it's completely worth it because then people really know what's on the other one's mind, you know. Early in relationships, when people first get together, they talk a lot, they talk about their dreams, their hopes, their wishes. And then as people kind of move along in their relationship, so many other things get in the way that they stop talking about those things that are so meaningful and they have passion about. And so one of the things we really want is to help bring that back, that feeling of passionate conversation.
Just to tag in on this a little bit, Julia, I knew somebody or know somebody who was the exact opposite in terms of the couple. The wife, they lived in an area where there was a lot of snow. And the wife finally said, I cannot take one more winter here. And she moved to North Carolina. 2-3 years later, the husband moves down. They still, communicated and vacations and stuff like that, but he moves down, and they're still together. They're still, happily married and whatnot. But it's the exact same thing. Same with North Carolina, but it was the opposite. It was the other person, the other partner. Just, I'm out of here.
Yeah, I mean, in both cases, they could have been talking about it for years, but they didn't.
Yeah, and some of it is you're pointing out, Dan. People just say, "I've had enough. I don't, I'm not. My life is not, going on forever. I have finite number of years ahead of me. I want to spend them the way I want to spend them. I don't want to live someplace where I have to shovel snow every winter, and it's important enough for me to make this choice to make my priority. Maybe I don't know that's exactly me time, but make the me priority a higher priority than the we priority, and I'm going to do this. If you want to join me, great. If you don't want to join me, then we'll be apart, and even if that threatens our marriage. I mean, that's a pretty strong statement for somebody to just pick up and move, unless they've kind of agreed to it beforehand. But I mean, these are some because of the. It's not just that the kids leave and people have to redefine themselves, but there is this idea that we don't have an infinite number of years to work with here. It's not like I'm going to make a compromise now and maybe 20 years from now I'll make a different choice. 20 years from now I may not have the health that I need to really pursue my dreams. I have to pursue them now. And so that means that there's a kind of increased sense of urgency, which makes those compromises just more difficult.
And the me time, we time thing is actually really important often for women who have spent a lot of time juggling career and childcare, and they didn't have any me time. They stopped all the me time. And then they get to the point where their kids are, they're empty nesters, and they feel this tremendous craving. Also, they don't even know what to do with a little bit of extra time, but they really want to have something for themselves, some other pursuit that they put off. And a lot of times it's not quite as true with men because, in our culture, it's a little bit easier for men to, let's say, spend the day golfing, whereas for women, it's a little bit harder. I'm hoping that's shifting and changing, as people shift and change. But for people over 60 or 70, whatever, that is a pretty common model. And so a lot of times a woman like the one that you mentioned, Dan, who moved to North Carolina, they might be feeling like I sacrificed a lot of my life for other people and it's time for me to do something for me. And it's so important that I will actually risk other things that I care about.
I'm picturing that perhaps another area of potential conflict or discussion is, let's say the kids have gone off to college, that I see in some couples, they remain devoted in the sense of they're going to visit the college regularly. Maybe, there's football team involved. Maybe that becomes a weekend activity. And great if both partners agree that they want to continue to devote that much in time person to their children. But I'm picturing that may differ for some couples, or even how much contact they're maintaining with their kids, or is there daily contact or less frequent? Um, do you see that sometimes among the folks that you work with in your practice?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And it is a marital issue. As a matter of fact, in a sort of global way, the marriage relationship or the couple relationship is primary. It should be primary. You know, you want your kids to launch. So if one of the people in the couple is overly, and it's hard to judge this, but like overly attached or engaged or constantly reaching out and connecting with one of the kids or multiple kids, then in a way they're prioritizing that relationship and not the couple relationship. And so we would want, again, the couple to talk through that, think through that, find some compromise, try to understand, you know, what is this person getting in their relationship with their children that they're not getting in their partnership? You know, what is it that they might need in their partnership to make that more primary so that they can let their kids have their own lives? But it's
Yeah.
complicated. It's different for every relationship.
Yeah, the other example of this is the other side of the generational connections that we have, and that is, we do a lot of work with family caregiving. You get people who are middle-aged, one or more of their parents are ill, and they have to make a decision about how much time they're going to devote to that parent's care versus their marriage. And I've literally heard spouses say to me, my husband understands how important my mom is to me, and I'm spending as much time as I can with her. And if he doesn't like it, tough, literally. People, and that's not compromise. If that husband is not understanding, that's headed toward conflict, and it was headed toward conflict. Um, and so we have to determine how, as Julie points out, how we balance out all these different relationships, making our marriage the primary relationship and not giving so much of ourselves to others. It could be to our parents, to our kids, to a given cause, or given a new career. I mean, how do we make our relationship central and take on those other things in a way that doesn't overshadow the commitment we've made to one another?
Well, let's talk about that conflict, that strain from a different perspective. The other area that I wanted to talk about in your book was finances. And as I talk to people, I've talked to a number of people that lost their jobs. And, they were 50 years old, they were 55, maybe they were 60. There's age discrimination, if you will. They apply, they're not getting jobs. Maybe they take a job that's lower in pay. Maybe they don't even find a job. Or alternatively, they retire early because there's an opportunity to do so, or they just quit early, okay? Which puts a tremendous strain on finances, particularly when people probably haven't saved enough already. So what do you see happening then to the relationship, and what happens as you forecast out to, their later years?
Finances are a huge issue throughout a marriage, and certainly no less so as people get older. And the issue, there's lots of issues around finances in retirement. I mean, so certainly, how much money should we save? How long should we work? Those are all big issues. And then honestly, retirement has enormous impact on spouses who may have seen each other in the morning, peck on the cheek, goodbye, honey, have a nice day, honey, and then come back at night and say, "How was your day, honey?" And they watch TV and go to bed. I mean, there's probably not a lot of contact, and suddenly they're under each other's toes all day long. I mean, one of my earliest memories is I had my best friend when I was an adolescent. His dad retired early. He was older than the mom, and came home, and suddenly he had been a boss at work, and now he comes home and he's trying to run the household after his wife had been running the household for years. And P.S. she was not just angry at him, but got very depressed, and because that was not a couple that handled that transition very well. So there's a monetary aspect to this, and there's a time aspect to this. When suddenly you don't have as much money as you thought you would, or thought you should, that's going to have implications. And then how you spend that money is part of the ongoing conversation and negotiation, and need for compromise. But also how you're spending time together. If we're not out working and we're spending more time with one another, is that a good thing or a bad thing for a marriage? It really can be a big strain on a marriage to suddenly, be in each other's hair all the time.
And if it's an involuntary retirement, like you were mentioning, Dan, for many people like get laid off or whatever, there is a lot of unhappiness around that. There's a feeling of shame. There's a lack of identity, especially for men, of course, work identity. There's a feeling that it's like their life is over. I mean, they sometimes they're even a suicide risk because they feel so diminished. So then, that person is sitting home on the couch. That's really tough. And if let's say, female partner is still working, that could make him feel worse. If she's not working, then she's home with this depressed guy. It's often very, very difficult. And I've talked to plenty of men in that position too. And just keeping that energy and that motivation to keep looking for a job or to redefine themselves, it is rough. I mean, they really need support and help with that. But
Yeah,
that's a crisis.
and sometimes the support is not forthcoming. I mean, that there may be either an explicit or implicit blame that one spouse levels at the other. That I work with an individual right now in a marriage like this where um, her husband lost his job, and whether she has said this to him or not, she believes that it's because he's very difficult and he was difficult for his colleagues to deal with. And she finds him difficult and they find him difficult. They found him difficult. And guess what? They got rid of him. And now, as you're pointing out, Julie, he's moping around the house and she's sympathetic to a degree, but another part of her is sort of like, this is your just desserts, buddy, for not being so nice all the time. And that doesn't strengthen the marriage. If he senses that implicit blame, he's going to feel worse and probably resentful besides.
It seems to me that couples in their 50s and maybe beyond into their 60s just face sort of an overwhelming demand on their finances too. Perhaps there's a commitment to try to help kids through college and maybe even beyond, saving for retirement, perhaps elderly parents or other family members who are looking for some support. And I know we've spoken earlier today about the importance of talking about some of these things earlier in life. But I'm also aware that sometimes we can't even necessarily be prepared for the demands that will exist there as we get older. How do you help couples navigate these conversations and, decide how to prioritize where their money goes or divide where their money goes, particularly if they see things differently?
Well, it does require a lot of conversation. Sometimes we recommend that they speak to a financial advisor. It
Mhm.
might be that simple that they disagree or they think differently about money. One person is saving every penny because they grew up without. Another person feels like it's okay to spend a lot on something because you only live once. And that, if they're on opposite ends of that spectrum, it would really help to have somebody who's taking their factual financial information and kind of running it for them and helping them make a plan that they can both agree to. And I've seen that work with couples plenty. So we do recommend that. We want them to talk to each other, the people in the couple, but sometimes it requires, a therapist or a financial advisor to really help a couple work out their differences if they're pretty large. And finances are so complicated. I mean, they say that in therapy, people will talk about, they don't, there's certain things they don't want to talk about, but they'll talk about sex before they'll even talk about money. That's how hard it is to talk about money. So for couples, it can be difficult too. And in many couples, one person is in charge of the money, the other person is not, and they don't want to be, and they don't know anything. And that's another whole problem because that person doesn't know how to judge what to spend. So one thing we recommend is that in that weekly meeting that people should have, they should talk about finances too. And every month they should pay the bills together. And then quarterly, they should really go over everything that is financial for them and what they're thinking about, what they'd like in the future, how they want to manage their money. It's about conversing about it. If you talk about it enough, if you do it together, you're more likely to be closer in your view.
So, Julie, It's a little distressing to find out that I'm breaking all of the rules, but let's ignore that for a second, and let's deal with the spending of money. I was in a conversation somewhat recently, and there was a group of people that were talking, and one woman turned to another woman and said, the first time he spent $80 on a towel, I was shocked, because $80 is the food budget. And that was just what they spent for the two of them, right? Maybe a couple of years ago, today would be $160 for food, but you get the point, right? We carry baggage with us from where we grew up. Now, none of us grew up in the Depression, but that doesn't mean we didn't grow up poor, or with less means, or with more means, as the case may be. So when as a couple, whatever type of couple you are, how much latitude or how much awareness do you have to have of where the other person came from in order to make sure that you have a good discussion about money?
I think that's crucial. And it should start way early, maybe even before people make a total commitment to each other. That they understand how they think about money, and they figure out a way to be a team about it. In a lot of relationships, it's not a team effort. One person's in charge. And so everyone has money baggage. There's no question about it. How they feel about it, what they think about it. If they watched their own parents struggle, if, let's say they're in their 50s and 60s and they watch their own parents, I don't know, become bankrupt, they have fears. Will I have enough money to get through the end of my life? I don't want to be a burden on my kids. It's all about making it as realistic as possible, which is why I recommend the financial advisor. But in addition, it's about empathy and caring. And okay, if you have a partner who grew up poor and you didn't, and you understand that they're frightened, well, then work with that. You talk to them about how not to be frightened. You reassure them. You go through things so that they understand that either there is enough, or we're going to budget so that there will be, or we'll figure it out. It's all about caring. At the bottom of it, all of these kinds of conflicts, the way to deal with them is to show that you care, to listen, to support, and to do that for each other.
Yeah, I mean, quoting John Gottman again, I mean, Gottman found that the couples who stayed together were not the ones who necessarily had fewer arguments over money or over sex or over childcare responsibilities, but they were the ones who, in the midst of argument, managed to maintain, communicate mutual respect and regard for one another. So money is an issue throughout marriage. It continues to be an issue at this point later in life. But if people can come at the financial challenges with a lot of feeling of mutual respect, and we're going to work this out together, then it generally works well. The other thing which is nice about money, as opposed to many other issues, is that it really is very concrete. I mean, when you hammer out a compromise, it can be, we're going to put a dollar figure on what we want to spend on vacation, and that could be something maybe a little less than what one spouse wants, but a little bit more than what the other spouse wants. But once you place that, whatever that compromise amount you're going to spend on it within a larger budget, and then you see what ramifications it has for other expenditures and other priorities, it makes, you can really understand sort of what impact it's going to have in dollars and cents. And so there's a lot of emotions, but finances in some ways is a lot easier to deal with than, for instance, sex or how much time one should spend with one's family of origin as you get older, or even how much time we should be spending with our kids and grandkids. Those don't quantify as easily.
I so often find when I'm sitting with clients, whether individually or as a couple, and we're talking about money, we're not even talking about dollars and cents as much as we're talking about values, even if the clients don't yet recognize that. And those values are often rooted in childhood or other pivotal experiences. So I really like what you mentioned earlier, Julie, about the, potentially bringing in a financial advisor, almost like a team approach, because, the work with a therapist might really be more about the value and recognizing where those come from. And I like to tell people in the therapy room, like, I don't tell people here how to spend their money. There are other experts out there for that.
Good answer.
I was also wondering, we spoke about retirement a little bit, but I imagine I'm thinking about couples where there's also conflict around if there wasn't communication about when one or both partners intended to retire, or maybe people change their minds along the way. And I guess that could run both ways. One partner deciding that they're ready to retire earlier than the other anticipated, but also maybe one partner is still really content working and wants to continue to do so well beyond what their spouse anticipated.
Yeah, I think that's especially true nowadays, Erica, because for many people work into their 70s without even thinking twice about it. And others, so this idea that we retire at 65 and start collecting Social Security is an antiquated idea for lots of folks, but not all. And there are some who maybe haven't been so thrilled with their careers, who can't wait to hit 65 or 66 or 67 when they can, take what is considered the full amount of Social Security and try to live off of that. Um, but that again comes down to the priorities that the couple set, how they, and a lot of it is going to hinge upon the lifestyle that they're planning for themselves. Are they going to maintain the house that they're living in or apartment they're living in? Are they planning on downsizing? Are they going to spend less money over time? I mean, oftentimes people have to spend less money over time because they are bringing less money in. Well, what is that going to entail? How are they going to make a decision about what their life is now going to be like, and also what kind of money are they going to have to support the life that they now dream for themselves. So it's all tied together with everything else.
And including the me time, we time thing. Because if one person retires and the other doesn't, the one who retired may be thinking, you need to retire too, so we can both have a good time. And the one who wants to keep working because they have a social life there, because it's a meaningful thing, it's fulfilling for them. Um, then there's potential conflict about what's more important. Is it spending time with your partner at this point in life, or is it continuing a career or a job that is really meaningful? And, I think it can become difficult for the partner who didn't love their job or has retired and, they want to have fun. And so then the conversation is, well, we need to both do what is best for each of us as well as both of us. And that includes a compromise again. If one person retires and the other doesn't, then the one who retires is responsible for filling some of their time with other people and other things other than their partner who's still working. And, maybe they end up with a compromise where the partner leaves a year early. I don't know. They have to talk it through and they have to both express what's important to them, what they want, what they imagine their future looks like. And then they have to come up with a way to make it work as well as possible. Nothing's perfect. And so they have to accept, like Barry said before, whatever is good enough. Try to get to good enough.
When I think about this topic, I think I understand completely what you're saying. I find when I talk to people that had to retire or lost their jobs, or for whatever set of circumstances, they just didn't work till as long as they wanted to, or as long as they thought they were going to. There's a tremendous amount of anger, either from them or from their spouse. And so how do you deal with that anger? Because you were supposed to work till you were 65. You lost your job. 6 years early. We're not going to have the money we're supposed to have. What are we supposed to do now? And what are you going to do? What do you do with that anger?
I think what often underlies anger is grief. And you have to acknowledge the anger, you have to contain the anger, but as a therapist, you have to help people get to the sadness, and which many people don't want to do, right? But most people prefer to be angry than sad, and I'll say that especially men prefer to be angry than sad. Um, but sadness in a marriage tends to bring spouses closer together. Anger tends to push them further apart. And as Julie pointed out earlier, when we were talking about grieving children who've gone off to college and maybe to another part of the country, when when spouses can grieve together, it in commiseration, it tends to strengthen their relationship, and that's what we want for the folks that are going through any loss like this. I mean, loss of a job, loss of the work identity. That's an enormous loss, and we don't want grief to tear people apart. We want grief to bring people together.
So, again, in preparation for our talk today, I went out and talked to as many people as I could. Um, but I was kind of struck by one woman who said that her husband was home, retired, lost his job, whatever the case is, he was home. And she just didn't want to be with him 24 hours a day. So she went out and found a job and had a little bit of anger over it, but quite frankly was happier than if she had been staying at home, and she was contributing towards whatever their joint objectives were for what they wanted to do. Do you see that often where roles change? I mean, particularly in today's environment, Julia, as you were talking about, women earn way more money than they had in the past. Maybe not enough, but they still earn way more money than they have in the past. And there's opportunities for them to fill the gap or exceed the gap that was created by the loss of somebody else's job.
I think your example is fantastic because it's a really good um, example of how tragedy or something that is negative that happens can lead to growth. So this female in the relationship said, "Okay, I'm going to go get a job. I don't want to hang around this downer guy all day. He'll have to figure that out himself." And so she goes and gets a job, and then she feels good about herself. She's earning money. She's contributing financially to the household, which maybe she hadn't when she was raising kids. And she has maybe a community that's new that she really likes. So sometimes when something bad happens, including emptiness, which is not bad, but it can bring up grief, um, the the thing that you're looking for is opportunity, growth, possibilities. And so you want to talk together about what are the possibilities? What can we make of this? Even a job loss, what can we do here? It doesn't have to be all grief. You absolutely should grieve together. You should understand that both of you are sad and scared and frustrated. And what can we do? We're not just going to sit around and be helpless. We're going to figure out what are our next steps. And we're going to figure it out together. And that strengthens the relationship too.
I'm thinking about a situation that I actually think you address in a different chapter of your book, but I'm thinking how it kind of ties together the empty nest piece of things we talked about today in finances, which is when a couple maybe has even done a lot of the things you're recommending here. They've communicated, they set goals, and then there's a situation maybe with a grown child or grandchildren that requires, or at least asks of them, their time, their attention, and perhaps their money as well. Um, and so I'm thinking how communication is so important in everything you're talking about today, and also building in some flexibility. So I imagine many couples have to learn to navigate together when they stick with their intentions, even when life makes other asks or demands of them, and when they can be flexible around some unexpected life events.
Yeah, I don't think intentions mean one's course ahead is carved in stone. I think it's always got to be flexible. I mean, we can't anticipate all the things that are going to happen. We can't anticipate the aging parent who falls and breaks a hip and needs to be placed in a home. We don't anticipate a grandchild who may need an operation, and their family may need some support for. I mean, so we have to always be ready to change our plans But again, getting back to what Julie says, it comes down to ongoing conversation, ongoing compromise, um, really planning how we pivot in different directions as need be, to handle or the things that are important to us, particularly for the people who are important to us. And so there are things that go by the wayside, uh, and that's just life. I mean, that's just the way it is. We strive for the things that are important for us, and then we sometimes don't reach those goals, but we discover other things along the way that we never dreamed would be gratifying for us, and that makes life, I think, richer.
So I want to be respectful of our time. I'd like to give each of you a minute to summarize, speak about what's important to you now, what's important from the conversation, or anything that you may want to promote. And Erica, why don't we start with you?
Well, certainly, I think such a takeaway for me from this conversation today is like the word communication. But we say that so often when we talk about couples, communication is key. But I really appreciate how you, Barry and Julie, both highlighted the importance of planned communication, intentional communication, and vulnerable and non-defensive communication. So, you pointed out it's important to have these regular times to sit down and set aside to talk. But that you're partners, you're not, this is not a business. And so the emotion and the vulnerability is key, it sounds like to me, to really good communication. That seems to me to be true throughout marriage. I just appreciate how you highlighted how true that is, at this new stage in life. So thank you.
Julia?
Thank you, Erica. That makes us feel good. Um, I would add a thing we didn't really talk much about, which is joy. That a couple really needs to work on having joyful moments together, because that is what fills that bank, so that when there are rough times, differences, things that they have to come up against financially or within their family, that joy is there. You want to be able to look at your partner and think, this is a great person. I have fun with him or her. I really enjoy hanging with them. That is so important that, and a lot of couples, especially when they get to the point where maybe they're empty nest or they're at retirement, they haven't put in enough of that effort to have joy together. So if there's one takeaway, I would say, aside from all the communication stuff, find ways to have joy together.
Yeah, and I'll just extrapolate from what Julie said. I like to use humor in therapy a lot, and so I'll say to folks, I want to bring up the F word, and they kind of look at me and I say, what do you do for fun? How do you make more fun in your marriage? I mean, again, quoting John Gottman again, it's all about how the proportion of interactions between spouses needs to be positive versus negative. That makes a huge difference in the degree of connectedness that people have. And so, like Julie says, I mean, this is a different part of life. It has different opportunities. It also has different limitations. And we have to figure out different ways of enjoying life together and growing together. But that fun part of it matters enormously, because there's also likely to be some rough spots along the way and some grief along the way.
So just to say two things. Number one, relative to the book, one of the things that I appreciated is that in every chapter there were checkup lists and there were next steps, so I could think through how to deal with a particular issue. There's 10 challenges in there. I know we only dealt with 2 of them, but nevertheless, great book. Second thing that I wanted to say is that when I think about everything that has gone on in my life, and in talking to other people, one of the things that strikes me is that when you're first getting together with somebody, you end up doing stuff that you really don't want to do. You end up going to camping, or you end up going to ball games, or you go to sporting events of some other sort that you just have no interest in doing, but you're trying to build a relationship with your partner, and so or your prospective partner, so you do it. Even now, I find there's times when there's something that I may not want to do or may not be that excited about doing, or my wife may not be that excited about doing, and we'll just compromise and just go off and do it. Not everything that each of us wants, but enough so that we have that fun, have that joy. And so even though there's many things that we talked about today that I'm not doing right, there's a couple things that I'm very happy about that we did do right. So I just wanted to tell you that great book, and I appreciated our conversation. I did want to say that our sponsor today is Equilibria Psychological and Consultation Services, whose mission is to help individuals achieve their personal potential and long-term growth by compassionately and respectfully helping clients live in balance. Visit equilibriapcs.com, equilibriapcs.com. You can look for them on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. You can also look for me on Instagram, Daniel J. Gomez 24, and on LinkedIn. Now for the disclaimer. Despite my stories, I am not a medical professional, and I am not providing medical advice. The opinion of our speakers is solely theirs alone. This podcast is copyrighted and cannot be reproduced without the express written consent of EPCS Management LLC.